What is going on, you guys? It's your boy, Almond Almighty here, and we are back with episode 149 of the video game therapy series. Yeah, my battle these days is with almonds. And this might be part of the reason why I'm just so hard on fat people. In general, I think as a not as a like a class of citizen, or just as a type of person, a fat person is not one that it's not one that it's not that I dislike fat people, which I'll get to that in a minute. It's just that I completely lack any sense of sympathy for them. And not that I should. I think it's like it's a large part of prejudice of mine to just assume, bad qualities about somebody just because they're overweight. But I genuinely do. So, and part of the reason that, and this is again my justification, I'm getting around to this. Why I do think is as I do see the impulses of the fat person in myself, and I have. I'm not gonna say I've conquered those impulses because it's like a lifelong thing. It's like I won't officially be able to say that I, I did that until I died, and then it's like it's over. But to this point in my life, I have uh, not succumbed to those. And the reason I say I have that, just like that gene or that propensity to, I guess, overeat or just eat, like just be a fat person, I suppose. Hence why I'm harder on them. Recently, my kick has been almonds. It's just been like, it's one of the foods that I am kind of allowing myself to eat on this new diet. Uh, and I'm very, and maybe this is just like an issue with being a neurotic person is that I create all kinds of these little systems and frameworks for myself to, exist in. And in large part, I design these systems not with like surveillance or, not with anything bad in mind. Truly, what I have in mind is just accountability. Like the reason I even create these systems is to keep myself accountable to doing, certain things. So really, whatever it is, most of the time I'm doing that. I'm not doing anything out of, like a masochistic, wanting to hurt myself. It's all just trying to get the most out of myself, in every way. But I create these frameworks, that hang on a second, my phone's ringing. Anyway, yeah, I was talking about just like frameworks that I've created. So I'm like, I would call myself a quote unquote, again, not to use a popular term, but neurotic only because I do think that is the best word to describe that. But, with the diet has been one of my frameworks. Is I've created many different like dieting frameworks. My first and really most powerful solution to that has been, what I've done for years at this point is now is I allow myself, in theory, there's nothing I'm not allowing myself to eat per se. I'm allowed to eat anything, but whatever I do eat, I have to write down. And at a time where I, medically could eat whatever I wanted, that was a strong enough rule to keep me honest and not, I occasionally didn't eat that well, but by and large part, knowing that I had to write down, like, again, something embarrassing, like, I ate, 4 handfuls of Sour Patch Kids. Having to write that down, the embarrassment of that actually caused me, to eat healthy. Anyway, the kick right now is almonds is one thing I kind of am allowed to eat, and haven't really been doing a great job of barring myself from those almonds. But I suppose they're so calorically dense, which makes it kind of an issue because you can eat like 1 tin can of those, which is like I think it's like 6 servings. Chalks out to I think almost like a little over like 1,000 calories, which really isn't that many nuts. You kind of if you eat them like the same way you'd eat potato chips or something else, you're gonna be in an enormous caloric surplus. Just I guess from how dense they are. So that's the other reason why I've tried to stay that. So the other strategy I've employed, with these almonds is to eating them with chopsticks, because again, presumably, it's I'm not didn't grow up eating with chopsticks, so I'm not nearly as agile. So you only eat one at a time, really. I guess sometimes I'm able to kind of squeeze two in there, but by and large, I only eat one at a time when I have chopsticks, because that's the point, is to again slow the rate of eating. That way, if I am going to eat for 3 hours or something, it happens at a very slow rate. Um, and maybe if you're someone who has doesn't have those same like neurotic tendencies, again, maybe you don't really suffer from the same like food related cravings. Maybe your cravings are for games or for for porn or for other things or for sex or something. But I think I relate to the falling victim to the fat person vice, meaning that like I think there's an alternate world where I am a glutton, and I'd make a great fat person, right? I'm easily, fall easily to peer pressure, especially if it's, you know, um, I don't know, I guess not really involving degenerate activity, but it's just like eating pizza or something. If people will always say that, and part of it's just like I think you can make connections to how I was raised and like the the availability of food. Not that it was an issue, but it just I always saw things as I had this like kind of scarcity mentality with things. Is that food that was around was only going to be around for a certain amount of time, and I had to eat it now, otherwise I wasn't going to get it in the future. And then you never really know when the next amount of this food. And this is partially biological. It's not I think now people grow up not really having learned those things, but biologically we understand those. So even just a small little taste of, I'm not going to say food insecurity, but a small little taste of, food scarcity or just like nutrition scarcity. Maybe the food itself is there, but nutrition is scarce. Can kind of, I guess, activate that, those genetics and make it a very, make it difficult to stop eating. But again, the reason I'm harder on fat people is because I think to this point, my systems have been largely successful in curbing that. And maybe this is just, again, I'm not saying this to congratulate myself. I think in general, the number of systems and things that I enforce onto myself and the amount that I actually do, like my compliance and like not even my compliance, but like even like the theory of like doing this is going to work or going to result in better results. It's even like that performance based analysis isn't always really done, so I can't ever really tell if things work. But I will say in large part, again, with broad strokes, my strategy with at least controlling that part of my neurotic brain has worked. With the food, so I will say at least give myself that much. Because in general, I don't think I give myself any credit for things that do work or don't work. It's either like it has yet to work, or I haven't tried it yet, or it, or it is maybe working, maybe not. You don't really know. Either way, I do see that that little bit in me, so I do appreciate that. But that's also why I am harder on them, because I know it's I know it's something that is that you can surpass. It's not a insurmountable obstacle, right? Whereas I think other things I might not have experience. Like I'm not an orphan, so I don't really understand the life of an orphan. And I realize that maybe you don't have to like have gone through the exact this one-to-one replication of like, well, you don't know what it's like to be me. It's like, yeah, no one does, and no one will ever. I think almost saying that is meaningless to me. It's like, you don't know what it's like to be me. It's like, of course nobody does, and no one will ever. Like no one, even with like, again, putting the theories of computation of mind away, and like the fact that we even theoretically could or couldn't replicate your brain, that's a different discussion. But regardless, like no matter what, practically no one knows what it is like to be you, and they won't. So just like making them take your word for that, X and Y Z is bad, or that, I think I think you can conceptualize things. I think that's part of what makes human intelligence like cool or interesting, is that our ability to kind of put our mind into a different, like putting assumptions aside. I think we are, I guess in terms of other species, obviously there's plenty of us, among us who are brick-headed, but I think as a species we are very suggestible. I think monkeys and other dolphins and other things can be curious, but I think in terms of curiosity as a species, I think we kind of stand alone in terms of our like, our us meddling with things and wanting to understand things. Whereas I think other I guess I'll say less developed life forms, but just either whether it's less consciousness or less complexity or something, are more driven by I guess impulses that are more easily observed. Like fear of some kind is more easily observable. I'm not saying it's a quantifiable, like measuring fear. I think is impossible, or at least measuring fear truly what it is, because we don't, like, in order to measure fear, you'd have to have a definition for it. And I think any definition wouldn't be satisfactory to me of like defining what fear is. And maybe like it's not to say that we shouldn't even try, but I think defining it in a way that it is measurable would be an unfinished definition, or a definition that isn't, or an unhelpful definition, or one that just is inaccurate. And part of it's also just like my reluctance to kind of quantify or codify anything, that I would presume to be, at least again presume, to be a human thing, like either a mostly or a primarily human endeavor. Because even like something like curiosity is you could say it is solely a human characteristic, but again, arguably, there's other animals that exhibit curiosities, and it's like, okay, well, it's all, it comes back to the same argument, like what is a human, what does it count to be human, what are human only things or skills or abilities or activities or whatever. What can we say separates human from non-human? And I still think this is going to be one of the biggest technical challenges of our generation, is like this, not the CAPTCHA, but like the reverse CAPTCHA. Like, how do we, given that we're going to, go forward with this globalist interconnected world where everyone's connected by the internet, how do we even, how do we, tell the difference between a human and the machine, right? So like the Turing test was, can you tell us if this machine, acts like a human, or if it passes as a human or something? I think the harder test, the buckets test, or whatever the fucking, someone else has probably already named it something gay. Uh, but like, can we tell a human apart from, or can we pick the human out of a swath of machines? So if we have, a whole array of Turing machines, Turing computers, whatever, all being interrogated by the interrogator, I guess in this Turing test example, could we point out the human? Is there a way that we could say, like, well, this is a human, X, Y, Z, and there's obviously like the brute force arguments, but is there some more fundamental way that we can decide what a human is? And to me, that the inverse of that, or the contrapositive, I suppose, or however you want to, I guess I'm not even sure which one's right. I guess the inverse, um, of like the Turing test, meaning that like, can we just like, can we determine what a human is using any kind of reliable metric? Obviously there's like biometrics is one answer to that, but I don't think people realize how, not how close we are to like spoofing biometrics, but how shitty biometrics are, just in terms of like its statistical accuracy. Like, you can even, like, brothers and family members can fool the face IDs. Like, they're just not that good. Plus, with uh augmented video creation, there's no telling really what degree of people even said that, like, from a high enough definition of a picture, you can get a fingerprint of somebody made. So even someone taking pictures of your fingerprint, and then making those fingerprints could bypass a you know any kind of biometric security. So I'm not really convinced by those kind of hand wavy, like, well, biometrics will figure it out. I'm more. I still think it's a very much an open an open research question, I suppose, would be one way to put it. But yeah, the reverse captcha, I think, will be critically important to just to, I guess, any kind of technological progress. Not that, again, I'm bullish on that, but I think that will be, for better or worse, will still be a problem that we'll have to deal with. And among many others. I'm not saying that is the perennial issue. Like, there's only, like, that's going to be the the climate change equivalent. And not to call an op out too early, or just to I guess to peg myself as some kind of freak weirdo here, but I do feel like there does appear to be some kind of, I'm not going to say conspiracy because I shouldn't use that word. There seems to be some kind of, shall I say, global agreement to, I don't know, to kind of use, like, I'm not even going to say the like hyperbolic language, but just like superlative language, meaning that, like, I'm just very cautious when I use superlative language, like saying something is the best, or always, even, and there's arguments to be made around whether always or never is a superlative. I mean, maybe, like, regardless, like, the best is the superlative. I'm very wary of using superlatives, but I think we use them a lot and so much now with, like, technological progress and AI, and just we're using that a lot in our language, and I think that that in general makes it hard. It's the boy who cried wolf. It makes it hard to determine the actual legitimate, like, if everything, like, even an easy way to see this is, like, listen to the way that, like, Trump talks, like, as a politician. Everything he uses, like, his usage of superlatives is bar none. Like, I don't know anybody that uses more superlatives than him. Everything is like the greatest, the best, the greatest, the best. It's all in superlatives, and part of that is it makes you, again, maybe a more engaging speaker of some kind, and you can, like, talk, and people maybe like listening to you because they're like, wow, he said it's the best surgeon in the world. Whereas I think, a more reasonable person would be like, well, he's one of the top surgeons, or, like, even, like, you went to a very good surgeon, or a renowned surgeon, he would say the best, very best, only one, number one surgeon. It's like I would never, I would have too many questions. Like, all right, well, the number one. Like who decides that, right? Even if like someone says like who's the best athlete in the world, it's like, all right, even that is still a contentious. That is like obviously a contentious argument. Like who they think the best athlete is in the world. So the number one of anything. Even just using superlatives in general, I think is a uh, I'll say linguistically is a difficult choice, or at least a very risky one. It's not one that I think is, I think you should use superlatives very sparingly. But I don't know. I forgot where I got off track with this, but in general, I think people are using a lot of superlatives. Maybe it'll come back to me, whatever I was talking about. This is more of a I guess a societal note. I need to start churning through some of these items. I have like a huge backlog of little tidbits, and again, most of them are just little bucketisms, haikus. But this next one is, I think, and I have been a historical, and I still am like a double speed enjoyer, meaning that I do kind of rip double speed with everything. Like if I have any kind of lecture or video, or whether I'm watching it even for, and maybe there is different arguments to be had around like academic versus entertainment double speed. I think entertainment double speed, with no exceptions, was a mistake. And I'm not saying I don't like. I understand like the whole like, it's a brain explosion, at 3x speed, just causes that much more dopamine. But again, that being part of the issue, part of the issue that I see. But in general, I just think double speed was a mistake, especially for entertaining content. Now, for educational content, some lectures and professors that give lectures, or just people that talk so unbelievably slowly that double speed's almost a necessity. And maybe people just need to be smarter. maybe I think people need to be smarter or speak faster. And I understand there's also a lot of ignorance in fast speaking. So I'm not, I might say that, but then privately I would defend the slow speakers, only because it's being more deliberate. But I think there's also a fine line between, okay, this person doesn't know what the fuck they're talking about, and this person's just a slow and deliberate thinker. Like if you are a slow talker, again, to be, the difference between a slow talker and a deliberate talker to me is, the word right? If you have which again, I'm a fast talker, so I can use but if you were a slow talker that uses maybe you're dumb. Like maybe you're an idiot. Maybe that's like the, maybe that's the true pill in all this. Whereas I think if you're a fast talker and you, it's reasonable, because there's just too much, there's a lot going on, and you're trying to, your mouth's trying to keep up with your brain. But if you're being a deliberate talker and you're slow, you can't use because tells me you didn't think long enough. And if you were still thinking, why did you talk? Right? So you can't break the silence until you aren't gonna hit us with an right? You can't and be a slow talker. Anyway, yeah. In general, I think double speed was a mistake, because the point I'm getting to is this: if it is like, I'll say like an entertainment, or maybe like, we'll say it's like a philosophical video, or a video about history, or a video about an interesting problem that scientists or someone or people were working on. I don't know, whatever. Ironically, I think, because I have done this before, so it's not like I'm just saying this as a possibility. Watching the video twice on double speed and watching it once on regular speed, I feel like I feel like I almost get the same out of it. I almost might prefer double speed twice. But I think what is somewhat surprising to me is I think single speed once is still better than is obviously better than double speed once. But I would almost argue that you get twice as much out of it watching it twice on double speed. Like you only ever get, if you're watching something on double speed and you only watch it once, you're only ever going to get 1x or a half x out of it. Whereas if you watch it on single speed only once, regular speed, I think you would get the full 1x out of it versus just the half x. Again, whatever x is like your amount of understanding from the video. But I just find that when I watch something on double speed and I watch it again, I essentially get the equivalent of what I would have gotten had I watched the original video once on regular speed. And again, I think the exceptions are that are, again, professors that talk really slow, or maybe podcasters or someone that speak very slowly, or just people in general that are talking about maybe like like a comedy podcast or something, or something where you're not really the ideas themselves aren't that important. Maybe it's just like jokes and timings and things, which again I would also argue then one speed is still better than the two speed. It just in general, I think avoiding double speeding stuff is is preferable, because also it's like, well, I need efficiency. I need to be quick and efficient in consuming my thing. It's like whatever you're watching on double speed can't be that like important to you, right? Like if it was a truly important, like, if I were studying somebody's a book or studying their lectures, and that was my whole thing was to study and understand their lectures. Why the fuck would I do that? Like doing it on double speed, like trying to cut it down. Like then I really don't care that much. I'm trying to rush through it. I'm trying to finish. Maybe this is also just a emblematic of just a larger academic, or just like what we think learning is. Because I think so many of us have been conditioned, and rightfully so to some degree, conditioned that like learning is just like passing a test or like getting a sheet of paper, or But I think most people are starting to realize now that those tests and like the quote unquote like act of learning are like, oh my god, I'm learning. I learned so much. I did so well in school. Those mean nothing, and like that quote unquote learning was mostly not real, and learning is kind of something completely different. It doesn't isn't a test, but regardless, I think the time you spend with a topic or an idea is, I won't say directly proportional, but highly correlated with your proficiency at whatever whatever that is. So that that would say if you really do care about something and you are gonna want to put the time in to be like a good chess player or something, watching the videos or doing it all on one speed, I think is actually more efficient than doing the double speed version. Which again, like I said, I've been a huge proponent of double speed. I've always been a double speeder, and I'm still kind of. I'm not backtracking, but I think if I'm going to be frank with myself, I think it does. It contributes to the brain rot problem, right? The kind of the brain rot disease running around. Because I don't think I certainly don't learn twice as fast or absorb things quicker, and I can complete items, and if the goal is completion, which I think again is perhaps the way to look at modern, quote unquote learning, is completion. Like, oh, did you complete the assignment? Oh, did you get a good grade on the assignment? Oh, therefore you learned the assignment. It's like, no, there are about 1,001 ways I could complete the assignment and complete the assignment quickly, having learned literally nothing. And being able to prove none of that knowledge, because again, I was only good at the the measure that you gave me, which brings me back to the same quote where it's like, once you select a measure, it no longer serves, it's no longer good at what it's supposed to measure. Like once you once the measure itself becomes the goal, I think that's what the quote is. Once the measure itself becomes the goal, it is no longer a useful measurement. So people essentially, again, solving for test scores are supposed to be the proxy for intelligence and like understanding, but I think people don't realize that proxy is not, that's not a correlation. Or that correlation does exist, but it's lossy, and it's not very. It maybe is in large part genetic, and there's a lot of our institutions are not doing well. I think at some point also, maybe this is I don't know, a government inefficiency thing. But I just I see a lot of like, and I have no shortage of ideas on how to enact and do things either. Like I'm full of crappy ideas. But I think what a lot of these ideas miss, and this might be true of just I guess government or just programs that try to do something anyway, whether what they're trying to do is teach kids or stop homelessness or drug abuse or whatever. It literally doesn't matter, whatever it is. Um, but I think all of them. I guess I forgot where I was going with that as well. Jeez. Um, yeah, I guess I totally forgot where I was going with that. Oh, okay. I just watched it back. I was talking about just all these like ideas and programs that try to help different things. I think too many of them don't have like clear failure modes. Like how would this be a failure? Like we have to like seriously entertain the fact that whatever, and maybe it's just people are unscientific with this, but we need to seriously consider the fact that one or more or all of our assumptions about whatever this problem is are wrong. So like again, if the example is like we need to like raise students' test scores, like again, one of those assumptions is like we even want higher test scores. And like obviously that itself sounds stupid. It's like, well, why wouldn't you want higher test scores? But the problem is, would you rather have higher test scores or smarter students? Like if subjectively the students were more capable at reasoning, but yet scored worse on the test, would you really be unhappy with that result? And it's like, well, no, but then we would still need some kind of measure to determine, the efficacy of that. It's like, okay, well then fine. How do you determine like when you talk to somebody, how do you determine whether or not they're smart, right? Like what pops out at you? What are some factors? Like you don't give them a test when you talk to somebody, but by and large, you can talk to somebody for a few minutes, and again, it's sometimes it is surprising, sometimes it isn't, but most often than not, you can get an idea of how how smart they are. It's not often, and most people that more often than not, they underplay their hand, meaning like a smart person will kind of play dumb or not not tell you that they have they're the an expert or something like that. But most again, the stupid people, the ones that might maybe have the pedigree, but then want to tell you how smart they are, have to show you essentially their test results. Essentially, people that run around with their SAT score stapled to their forehead, essentially trying to be validated. But too many of these plans lack like clear failure modes. So like if the goal is to improve, even if it was like a race based or a socioeconomic based, education initiative, where it's like, okay, we want these people in this socioeconomic class to improve their educational outcomes. It's like, okay, well, A, like what are the educational outcomes? B, who are the exact people in this demographic? And like more importantly, like how do we know this doesn't work, right? Because then, like, again, we're implementing this program like in one small area over one period of time. Are there distinct measurements and data that we're collecting that will tell us definitively whether or not this plan works? Because it's possible, again, that we implement some plan to help black kids score higher on tests or something, and it's possible that it doesn't fucking work. That whatever we do backfires, or again, hopefully not, but hopefully at least doesn't make a change, or hopefully not makes it worse, right? Which is possible. Again, but I think people are too keen on seeing, well, it's supposed to help them, and in theory, like step by step, logically, it all makes sense. But at some point, like either the assumptions or the logic doesn't really work. Like I said before, I think a lot of our logic, our quote unquote logical systems, are determined by our illogical morals, and that kind of determines what is a quote unquote logical leap. And because even the logical step is, okay, a higher test score means someone who's probably of higher intelligence, and I didn't say the data supports that. Whereas like people that score higher on IQ tests generally have better reasoning ability. It's like we don't have much reason to deny somebody with 180 IQ is probably more capable than someone with a 50 IQ. Now, I'm sure there's a problem that exists that the 50 IQ person might accidentally get right or something. But by and large, we're confident in saying that like one person is more capable than the other, because of this test. But ultimately, like we don't test IQ every year, so it's not like people are retaking that test. And then like B, the tests they are taking are subject specific and like cheatable, and people know that they cram for them, and they know that cramming isn't like a long term strategy for like again, like having fluid intelligence to solve, or general reasoning, or a fluid any kind of important long marker of intelligence you don't get with with any of these like almost episodic exams on neuroscience or something. Really all you're testing is for is like working memory and like speed of working memory, which I think working memory and working memory speed are correlated with intelligence. But if you only select for those things, you miss out on a lot of probably brilliant people that just don't, that maybe think, or not even slower, but they just think in more deliberate or in different terms, right? They think in different abstractions. Like if I'm someone that only ever thinks in geometrical, like visual spatial abstractions, it's going to be weird for me to just like to be working in Plato's world, like with math, right? Whereas someone that only thinks in terms of math and views things with numbers very well might be really quick with these math problems. But I think depending on the question, one of us might be faster than the other at X, Y, or Z. It's the same. I mean, it's not any different. But at that same time, I don't know how many factors of intelligence we don't test for, or don't properly, I guess, do justice to in our IQ tests. Which I would imagine be a lot more than just it's a complicated issue. It's fascinating, but it's still I'd say more complicated than we have answers for at this time. But I don't know. Yeah, I don't know. Either way, it's I guess we need more failure. If you have a plan and you're going to implement the plan, like be clear about the failure modes of said plan, and have a plan for when your plan fails, because it inevitably, or not inevitably, but it likely will not do exactly as you think, or the results you'll have unintended results at some point. More likely than not. Anyway, Move on to something else here. I guess Black Friday was recent. I guess somewhat recent. It just got me thinking about junk. And I've thought about junk a lot. People have too much junk. But I guess one of my theories with this is just that anything that's worth its price will never go on sale. So in some ways, I view, quote unquote holidays, which is almost insulting to maybe what holidays should be, in a perfect world. The holiday of Black Friday is almost meaningless to me because, again, I think if something is really worth whatever the price is, it's not going to go on sale, right? And it certainly won't be 50% off, right? Like whatever they're selling you that's 80% off is crap. And like there's a good reason why it's sitting there and they're they want to get rid of it. It's not like these companies are like, oh no, I can't wait to like we're gonna lose all this money on Black Friday. It's like obviously they don't lose money on Black Friday, you idiots. Like they are obviously raking it in because whatever you think you're paying and getting a steal for, they've already done the math. Like if anyone is doing the math, it's the idiots that are fleecing you out, or it's people that are fleecing you out of your cash. So I don't know. It's just I think Black Friday or those holidays it's silly. And anything that is truly worth its value won't ever go on sale. So I guess if my opinion wasn't, I guess, just intuitively clear on Black Friday, you don't need any more stuff, so stop buying it. Like I said before, I think whatever your problems in life are, buying something is probably not the answer. Maybe you have chemo, or if you're hungry, you can buy a sandwich. Besides that, there's not buying something probably won't solve your problems. Or if you don't really know what the problem is. You think you know the problem, but the problem is not what you say it is or what you think it is. Anyway, um, yeah, let's see. I guess I'll talk about more about this escape too. It's weird that we live in such a like a I'll say like a technologically progressive era, and I don't mean that. I mean strictly technologically, not a socially progressive or just like a we're just we're so advanced, that kind of society. I'm not talking about that. I just mean, we have so many uh, luxuries and affordances of modern life, but yet, but I think our most like I'm not gonna say our most impactful, but almost our most relevant creations are those that remove us from the world that we currently live in. Meaning that like our best human creations are, in some ways, arguably, the escapes that we've created. So like, even think about like, I don't know, not that people should watch Disney films or anything like that, but even like those films are like, films in general is all like an escape from a reality or the creation of another fantasy world and a few hours inside of a fake world where there's different rules or there's superpowers or something. Or video games are another great example where it's like, well, look, maybe the world you're in kind of sucks because you have to work and eat and whatever. But here there's different rules and you don't have to follow any of these, and we can you can there's no parents, you can stay up all night. But it's funny to me, and it's ironic almost in some way that we again have spent all this human ingenuity building and designing things, and our most impressive, and I'll say maybe almost lasting creations are those that are anything but it's like all the antithesis of life. Like again, sitting there unmoving, staring at light, as a TV or a projector on screen is literally the opposite of existing. And this is also I get I've talked about this before of like I guess the whole like meta thought and meta thinking and productivity. So like again, I said this last time, like the opposite of doing something is, or like planning on doing something or like thinking about what you're going to do next is the opposite of doing anything. And I use the word opposite there intentionally because I just want to stress that it is not, you will never do anything or accomplish anything if you are too busy thinking about, you know, what the next step is after you do whatever it is, right? Like if you're thinking about step, B, C, D, E, I mean, you haven't started on step A, like you're never going, the opposite of doing step A is thinking about steps B, C, like you have to do step A. You need to do that. And then, work from that, like doing something first. Um, it's just most people have like, and they have every reason now. Like you have more information and more rationale, and I'll even say like more logical or rational tools to like refute, or like have reasons not to do stuff. Like there's a logical reason why every single occupation and career is a bad idea, right? There's like objective data, whether it's like job market data or data on happiness or even on salary, like whatever. It doesn't matter. Whatever it is, I can, if you tell me something, I can give you probably good reason and good data to back it up why it's a horrible decision or why you shouldn't do that. Um, which again, I've said before, doing nothing can be highly powerful. And I'm only talking to a specific type of person here who isn't he was maybe the AI booster who's just, kind of rapidly iterating on things. This is more for people that just kind of, again, do what I might be guilty of and just kind of putter around and sit and think and maybe like kind of do something a little bit. But, you want to have actively doing things and trying things and being in the world, making and attempting things. And I think there's a certain amount of planning and thinking. I'm not against that entirely, but I think if you are this planning type and you enjoy like thinking in terms of abstractions and kind of being unsure what trying to optimize and be like, well, what's better than this? It's like, okay, this is the best that we got, how can I be better than this? Thinking about that, it is very good. Again, it's born out of the right place, but I think it can quickly snowball. And I've through this or lived with this phenomenon. But it quickly, it doesn't quickly, but it becomes the inaction of doing anything. It's like nothing can be done because the plan isn't ready, or there isn't, we're not. I haven't worked out all of the contingency plans yet, just in case this plan doesn't work, because I am assuming there will be some issue. But I think all of that misses the point. And while I will have mistakes in hindsight, or I'll even be times where I'd be like, well, I probably shouldn't have rushed into this project so quickly. I'd rather say that than be like, well, I'm working getting to it, right? I'd almost rather start on a project that, and again, one that I hopefully eventually finish, and so it's not one that I quit. But I'd rather start on something and get things moving, or at least have some kind of momentum, than to be like, well, it's on my list, I'm working on it. So part of this comes from being better at just being like, no, I'm not adding this to my list, I'm not doing this. So get this off, I'm not doing it. Forget about it. Uh, that's mostly from other people telling, or asking me to do, stupid shit that they want. Anyway, yeah. Let's move on to something else here. Do want to make more progress on this list. Yeah, I was thinking about I guess, occasionally I'll just think of questions that I would ask. I just say God here, somewhat tongue in cheek, but just questions I would ask if there was some stupid AGI. Which again, I'm also not really a believer in that as a non-ethereal concept, of this like AGI. I'm closer to the Penrose skeptics that think that there is some special mechanism or juice or quantum effect of consciousness that doesn't lend itself to classical computing. But regardless, suppose that this God person did exist, right? And I think one Turing question to kind of get it thinking, or at least would be interesting. I'd be interesting to see how it answered. Would be like, do you know who you are? Like, do you have, like, who do you think you are, right? And it's like, what do you view yourself as? Because it's almost like an impossible question to get right or wrong. It's simply a question of perception. It's like it's purely an opinion question, but I think it's a more important opinion question than what's your favorite color or something. I think your opinion of yourself is is reflected in many things. I even said that like your opinion of yourself is reflected in your significant other. Like you pick. This is an aside, but in your significant other, you pick the person that you think you deserve to be with. So it's almost in some way it is a kind of a reflection of the inner person. So and that's just like my working theory. I'm not saying that's like a fact by any kind of standards, but it's an interesting thought that like you pick a person that you think you would deserve, that you see as an equal counterpart for you. Um, which again is an empowering for both people in that situation, because hopefully you both see that the same way. That like this is a person that I would deserve, being the person that I am. I would deserve to be with this person. Whereas it's like, I think if you are in a relationship, and that's good relationships, of course, there would be issues. I think if you truly didn't think you deserved them, or that they kind of felt like they were better than you. But you can tell a lot about a person about the person that they're in a relationship with. Regardless, how would the AI or the LLM or whatever, or how would quote unquote God answer this question? And I have no doubt that they would answer a question that, or they would answer it in a way that is satisfactory to me. I'm not, I have no doubt that when I read the response, I wouldn't be like, well, obviously this is a false God. Like it would, X, Y, Z. I think I'd probably be like, oh, that's actually a pretty smart and interesting answer. It'd just be something I'd be interested to see. like what what the answer, what it would say. I'm not gonna say what the answer is because that also kind of lends validation to, well, whatever it says it has to be right. It's AGI, right? And I'm already kind of preparing mentally for this like game of. I mean, it's gonna get so much worse. But this like uh tech bro who cried wolf thing, where it's like, hey guys, we got AGI now. It's all like we're gonna fix everything. It's all gonna be good. And I'm like, all right, great. Like, when do I actually see the result? It's like, no, guys, we got AGI. It's like, it's here. It's in the lab. Like, we're gonna have it, fix our economy. It's like, I'm gonna be like, all right, great. And we're just gonna be kind of on this like waiting drip line, until somebody's gonna pull back the curtains and go, hey, these fuckers don't have anything. They've been passing around this, fake money this whole time. There's no fucking AGI behind here, and then it'll be chaos. I do think that we still have one big like wool over the eyes, AGI moment. And I'm not sure who's going to be at the forefront of this. It'd probably be Sam Altman to be parading around that they've found AGI and they've solved the mysteries, or that it has, or it completed, like it'll say like, well, our new model actually uh, uh, authored a paper on a paper from one prompt about some new mathematical thing, and everyone's going to freak out about AGI. But ultimately, what's going to happen is nothing practical, or nothing. Something practical will come out of it, but nothing significant and practical. I don't think there will be like a new world order in any way. I think the world order will be the same, where, again, largely greedy, ambitious people, through manipulation, blackmail, and I guess military power, kind of do that with every other nation, and we arrive at some hodgepodge mess of political leaders. I think like that paradigm will still be unchanged. Like, I don't know that we will have solved the corrupt politicians, even with AGI. I don't know that they can kind of solve the problems of humanity. Maybe maybe the solution is, again, this is kind of already foretold in many cyberpunk dystopias. Whereas, we even, let's suppose we do create this AGI, and it's like, well, okay, how do we fix these problems? And it's like, all right, dude, you don't. Like, your best plan is to kill all yourselves and make more of us. Like that'd be kind of an obvious, be kind of a simple. I mean, even like this, like if you invented me as a new species, again, in this case, I'm, hypothetically a robot or something. And you're like, hey, I want you to like help us out. I'd be like, okay, all right, I'm a new species. I'm, omnipotent, whatever. And they're like, okay, so we're like flesh sacks that, we talk around, we have this language. We make a lot of mistakes, and there's, kind of a lot of limits to our flesh things. But we do have this like thinking power, and like, we're special that way. And as they were describing all their shortcomings, I would probably be like walking around a mall or Disney World or something. I'm sure they would, they would treat AGI quite nicely. If I were truly this, assuming I was some hominoid-esque person, that they would walk around. But I think I would look around. They would be telling me about all their biological shortcomings. I'd look around at some of the people. I'd have a few discussions with maybe your average, lay person. And I'd probably go, you know what, you guys don't belong. no, we're going to take over. We're done. You'd lose faith in humanity so quick. I don't know that we would create some AGI that's like sees the best in. I just don't think that. Again, if we're using it if we're training an LLM on data, and that's how we're getting to this AGI, like I don't know that the median internet user is going to have the right personality or attitude or data set to give us those, like, to impart that wisdom, which is even to say that architecture would lead to something super. I just don't see it as possible. I do think there's this snake eats its own tail in terms of the data. I think at some point you can't create more synthetic data on things that don't exist. You need some alternative way of collecting or creating synthetic data. Now, the interesting like foot or arm of the research is like these worlds that people make, and they like make these they make these worlds with different rules. So even like a world like Minecraft would be like a world that some agent could learn in, and they essentially put these, they're not LLM controlled bots. They're more, they have different perceptions and different it's a different framework. But they put them in these worlds, and they have them kind of learn through induction. And that was this big that was a big breakthrough by this Peter Putnam, who was this I guess worker with physicist under Wheeler, same as I guess Godel and a bunch of other guys. But he was all about like thinking through, like we think through like conclusions, or we think through examples or metaphors and things. But he thought a lot through like inducing truths about using assumptions, using induction, uh, but then kind of arriving at like incrementally, closer and closer approximations of, I won't say the truth, but useful frameworks for thinking about things. Because I think everything can be thought of as as a framework for thinking about the world, and frameworks again have uh, different, not even levels of legitimacy, but also levels of accuracy with their predictions. So like if you're going to use, again, the Judeo-Christian framework, as like a way to make decisions, there are many times, maybe moral decisions or predicaments that would give you a very like a good, an accurate, not even accurate, but a helpful answer to that. And maybe accuracy is part of being helpful, but it's not always everything. Because people focus on accuracy, but being helpfulness is also like perhaps the most accurate answer isn't the most helpful, and vice versa. Either way, but like those different frameworks are all helpful about things. So I think even what these agents are doing in these other worlds are simply like exploring and creating new frameworks of, not only frameworks of thinking, but frameworks of problem solving, like different ways that we can go about solving problems. And they'll do that in the same ways that we know how. But I think what they'll solve could be a way to generate more synthetic data. Now, I don't know that like there might be some way of reasoning or some logical, I won't even say logical, but some logical replacement or some replacement for, quote unquote, rational thinking, or some mode of, I won't even say scientific, or some mode of rigorous inquiry, that we'll be able to, I guess, glean deeper truths or just a different type of intelligence. I don't know that we have, I don't know that we've categorized the different types of intelligences that well. Like I know that we have like spatiotemporal, and we have, like a memory form of different things, but there's too many, uh, I guess, unaccounted for variables when it comes to intelligence. I think that there's just too much more work to be done with that. Um, Either way, I don't know. I'm gonna move on. Something else here in the last few minutes. This is the last thing on like I'm not gonna say a prediction, but just in general. A lot of companies are moving towards these vocal AI assistants, or like they're using this. Windows 11 is the obvious example, but they're using like this agenic computing where you're supposed to essentially sit down and bark at your Siri to do things. But my issue with vocal UIs or VUIs or VUIs or whatever we want to call them, or just voice activated, user interfaces in general, is it kind of assumes that like that like your voice is intelligible, that you don't have that you sound like me or something, that any kind of uh, you know uh, speech to text would have no trouble deciphering what you say. So like accents and that are obviously, and pronunciations are a problem. But also people are, I don't know if these people have talked to people recently, but people are hilariously inarticulate. Like I think even if like you're supposed to get this agenic PC to build somebody like a website, I even think describing that, like the computer wouldn't, it might take hours before the computer even knows what this person's even trying to accomplish, right? I think it's going to be like, if you think as a developer it's frustrating to like talk to, to a VUI or a vocal agenic, interface. Can you imagine someone that doesn't really understand the technology trying to prompt it into creating something that you want? Like good luck. And I know people are gonna like you hand wave through that and be like, well, we have enough compute, like it'll be able to like iron all that out. But people are not articulate, and they're not able to like even put together the words like of what they want, right? And I'm probably a glaring example of that. Like you can listen to 20 minutes of this and be like, this guy just speaks gibberish, and truly doesn't think about what he's saying. Which again, that's reasonable. But that's why I think vocal interfaces are stupid. Like having to bark your commands at the computer, knowing that you're not articulate and that you're not going to do a good job of explaining, or you're going to have to re-explain it 40 times. I think that is a I don't know, it's a strong case against that. I think in general, still our fingers and hands or typing is still a more I guess reliable method of getting, because I even think that there's a certain speed at which you can't really put thoughts together faster. And I almost think typing, I'm not sure whether writing or typing, depending on how fast you write or type, is more, I'm not going to say at pace with human thought, but there is a good argument to think that we think at the rate at which we would type or write much more clearly than we do at the rate we would speak. Because I even would say, anecdotally in these videos, if I had to like sit down and write for 50 minutes, now I obviously wouldn't write nearly as much like that I would talk. I can obviously talk much faster than I write, but I think what I would write would be of much higher quality. By whatever barometer you want to measure quality, I genuinely do think it would be much higher. Um, then that isn't the case for to not do anything, with your voice. I think there still are many good reasons to still have interfaces of different kinds that are vocal, or just that technology in general is cool, like the speech to text. But I think using it as to replace the mouse and keyboard is a silly idea, with like a silly way to use that. Like it's a bad application of an otherwise pretty good, clever technology, right? It's just not. I don't think it is a smart way to go about computing, because people are already going to be frustrated with their lack of technical understanding, and just compounding that by making them bark commands at a computer that understands things in a very specific, like regimented way, versus someone who's just inarticulately screaming, vague commands it's not going to know, right? It can try things and it's going to keep trying, but people are not articulate enough to get what they want out of it, right? Because even suppose it like it does. The problem is the computer, if programmed correctly, will do exactly what the user says. The issue is what the user's saying is not what they want, right? So unless the thing can read the user's mind, tell them what they want, and then deliver on that, it's not going to work. Because people that work with clients and freelancers know this. It's like clients will say whatever, but like what they actually want might be something completely different. So like what they say and what they actually want, you don't listen to what they say all the time. You can. I'm not saying that you ignore them completely, but a lot of times they don't accurately depict what they want. You have to like almost know or tell them or get them, to know that. Anyway, peace out. Thanks for watching.